Imagine a silence so profound it swallows the world. Now, imagine that silence being shattered by the smallest gasp of life. This is a story of impossible survival, an unbreakable bond, and a discovery that defied all logic and nature. It began in the desolate wastes, where hope had long since dried up and blown away with the dust. Our witness was Jack, a grizzled search and rescue veteran, exhausted after days of fruitless searching. He was looking for survivors from a sudden, catastrophic mudslide that had buried a small settlement days earlier. The official searches had ended. They had concluded there was no chance of finding anyone alive. But Jack kept walking, driven by a feeling, an insistent, nagging whisper he couldn't ignore. Then he saw it, a patch of earth that looked slightly different, disturbed, yet unnaturally still. He knelt down, brushing the heavy dust aside, expecting to find perhaps a piece of fabric or debris. What he uncovered next wasn't debris, it was human. A face, a woman, buried up to her neck in the hard, unforgiving earth. Her skin was caked with mud and dust, her hair plastered to her skull. She was unresponsive, yet Jack leaned closer, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the silence of the desert. He heard the sound, faint, ragged, but undeniable. She was still breathing. A miracle, perhaps? Or a nightmare of endurance? She had been trapped for days. Jack immediately grabbed his small shovel, beginning the agonizing process of excavation. He worried about causing injury, the pressure of the earth having held her body in a death grip. As he dug down to her shoulders, he noticed something impossible. Her arms, they were positioned stiffly, held tight against her chest despite the crushing weight. The mudslide had entombed her, yet she had maintained a singular protective posture. Jack scraped away more dirt, revealing the devastating truth of her struggle. Nestled securely against her chest, shielded from the crushing force of the earth, was a small bundle. And within that bundle, covered in the same dry earth, was a baby. He was small, perhaps no more than a few months old, and miraculously, he was breathing too. The mother had used her own body, buried alive, as the final, desperate shield for her child. 4 days in the ground, 4 days surviving on sheer will and the fierce, unyielding power of maternal love. Jack radioed for immediate backup, his voice thick with emotion he usually reserved only for funerals. But the rescue was far from over. Freeing them without causing a catastrophic collapse was critical. He began the painful task of digging around them, stabilizing the earth as he went. The woman, whose name Jack later learned was Elara, finally opened her eyes fully. She didn't ask for water. She didn't ask to be saved. Her first whispered word was just one syllable. Him. The baby's name was Michael. He was warm, sheltered by his mother's body, her warmth a tiny pocket of life. We must understand how they got here. Elara and Michael were traveling through the region when the storm hit. The mudslide was sudden, a wall of liquid earth crashing down from the unstable cliffs. Elara had only seconds. She grabbed Michael and instinctively dove, seeking the narrowest point. She hit the ground hard. The mud, initially liquid, enveloped her entirely, pushing her downward. The pressure was enormous. It pinned her, but also molded around her, creating that one crucial air pocket. As the sun baked the surface, the mud turned into concrete, sealing her fate, but also protecting her. She was conscious through the initial burial, using her last reserves of strength to keep Michael positioned safely. Imagine the terror. Trapped, unable to move, unable to shift, dependent on that shallow breath. The intense heat during the day, the freezing cold at night, she faced both extremes. But every time the pain threatened to take her consciousness, she felt the weight of Michael. That small, soft weight was her reason, her singular, unwavering purpose. The rescue team arrived quickly, their faces grim as they took in the unbelievable scene. They knew this wasn't just a rescue, it was a medical impossibility brought to life. The first step was stabilizing the baby. They needed to move Michael without disrupting the mother's fragile state. Elara gave one small nod, a sign of permission, her muscles rigid from the prolonged tension. The medics carefully lifted Michael free. He was dehydrated, but miraculously unharmed. As Michael was carried away to safety, the weight of the earth around Elara's arms became even more apparent. Her arms, held in the same position for days, were locked, the circulation severely restricted. The digging became slower, more precise. Shovels were abandoned for dental picks and brushes. Every minute counted. Internal bleeding, organ failure, and shock were immense threats. Jack worked tirelessly, talking to Elara, reminding her she was safe, telling her Michael was okay. He told her about the world above, about the sun, the wind, the simple joy of movement. Hours passed. The extraction was taking too long. Frustration mounted, but the team remained steady. Finally, with a soft shift of the earth, they reached her torso. Her body was cold, her vitals perilously low, but the core of her spirit remained unbroken. They fitted her with a neck brace and a backboard, preparing her for the most dangerous part of the rescue. The final lift. One coordinated movement. They had to get it right. With a strained grunt, Elara was lifted free of her earthen tomb. She was immediately enveloped in blankets and rushed to the waiting transport. Looking back at the hole, Jack saw the imprint of her struggle, the perfect, silent mold of a woman holding her child. This wasn't just dirt. It was a monument to sacrifice. Elara and Michael were flown by helicopter to the nearest major medical center. Their recovery was slow and arduous. Elara faced severe dehydration and muscle damage. Michael, however, was in surprisingly good condition, a testament to his mother's protection. The doctors called it a medical anomaly. They could barely believe the duration of their entrapment. Days later, Elara was strong enough to hold Michael properly, out of the earth, under the light. The media frenzy that followed was immediate. The story of the Earth Mother spread globally. People were stunned by the sheer power of her will. What motivated her to endure such unimaginable pain? Her body was screaming for relief, yet her mind refused to yield. She couldn't abandon her post. When asked later, Elara simply said she never stopped talking to Michael, even when she couldn't speak aloud. She would recite songs, lullabies, and promises, keeping her own voice and sanity tethered to him. Every thought was a shield, every memory a breath. The ordeal changed Jack, the rescuer. He saw humanity at its most fragile and its most formidable. He realized that the true heroes were not those who fought the elements, but those who silently defied them. The story became a symbol of hope in a world often consumed by disaster and despair. A testament that even when the entire world is trying to crush you, love can hold the line. But the story does not end with their rescue. Elara's journey of healing required months of intensive physical therapy. She had to relearn simple movements, her muscles traumatized by the rigid confinement. Yet she never complained. She had survived the worst. This was simply the hard road home. Michael grew quickly, oblivious to the heroic sacrifice that saved his life. He was the living proof that a mother's embrace is the strongest armor in existence. Years later, Elara and Jack met again at a foundation dedicated to disaster preparations. She spoke publicly about her ordeal, transforming her trauma into an inspiring message. She stressed that survival wasn't about strength, but about focus, a reason to keep breathing. Jack recalled that agonizing moment of discovery, the fear, and the profound realization. He remembered the raw desperation in her eyes before she finally slipped into unconsciousness. The weight of the earth held her captive, but the weight of Michael's small body held her conscious. The place where they were found is now marked by a small, quiet memorial, a reminder of the lives lost and the 2 lives miraculously regained. The earth itself became a character in their story, both the villain and the unwitting protector. We often talk about the power of the human spirit, but Elara's story shows us the power of the primal, selfless instinct. The instinct that compels a creature, human or animal, to sacrifice everything for the vulnerable. Elara lost her mobility, her comfort, her identity for days. But she never lost her hold, never let go. Her life was temporarily suspended. A clock stopped at the moment of impact. Yet, she made sure Michael's clock kept ticking. Think about the level of discipline required to endure the cold, the hunger, the crushing pressure. She couldn't move her head. She couldn't scratch an itch. She couldn't call for help. Her world was reduced to the space between her chin and the baby's blanket. That small, dark space was, for days, the entire universe. It was a universe governed by one simple biological mandate: protect. The true miracle was not that she survived, but why she chose to survive. Her body had been a vessel of protection, purchased at the highest possible price. Elara and Michael are more than survivors. They are legends. Their story resonates because it strips away all modern complexity, leaving only fundamental truth. We are capable of greater endurance than we allow ourselves to believe. And the instinct to cherish life is stronger than the force of any disaster. Think about the people in your life who serve as your own personal anchors. The Michael you would hold on to when the world tries to bury you. Elara's sacrifice ensured Michael's future. They survived the worst prison imaginable, not by fighting the walls of Earth, but by creating an inner world where only hope and love could exist. The story of Elara is a challenge to every fear, a defeat of every disaster. A chilling scene transformed into the ultimate hymn of humanity. She was found buried up to her neck, still breathing, and she never, ever let go of her baby.